Well, hey, everybody, I'm Dr. Tom Ulrich, and I like to talk about leadership and engineering. Hey, in this video, I want to do a quick checkup on your leadership and ask this question. How are you leading your engineers, or how well are you leading your engineers during this whole COVID-19 thing? Any rate, to do that, I've got a couple thoughts. First is let's take a moment to revisit what is leadership. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos there simply is nothing even vaguely resembling a consensus on this. So the fun part about that is everybody talking about leadership can simply use their own definition. So this is the definition I proposed in my PhD dissertation. So I said leadership is a process of influence that involves relationships, communication, and vision. So let's break that down. Okay, so first of all, leadership is a process. Now, the idea there is we're trying to contrast it to the saying like leadership is a trait. You know, this guy's 6'2", he's got blue eyes, he weighs this much, and he is a leader, or something like that. Because the problem with the trait approach is twofold. First of all, it doesn't ring true. The premise is, saying leadership is just about the leader leaves you with some funny conclusions like, well, if you're good at leading engineers and leadership's a trait, then you'd be equally good at leading cheerleaders or athletes or 2-year-olds, or it's clear that leadership involves the follower. You can't say, are you a good leader? You immediately have to, how are you at leading this group or that group? So being an engineering manager, it's not a trait, and it's a process that involves the leader, the follower, and the context. And so all said and done, there's a very complex system interaction as opposed to saying something simplistic like, you are, or maybe what percent you are, or something like that as a leader. And the second important implication then is that we're not on a search for leaders. We're not looking for the next Abraham Lincoln. We're not looking for the next Nelson Mandela. What we're doing is we think leadership can be developed. So we're instead of looking for the leaders, we are trying to develop the leaders. Okay, so with leadership, then it's not that we're just sort of on a search for looking for that leader. Instead, we're trying to figure out to what extent is this person developed as a leader and helping them develop more. And a very common mistake is for leaders in that process to sort of compare themselves to other people and say, well, I'm better than this, it's good enough. And then I guess I would refer you to Michael Jordan. At some level as a basketball player, that guy has natural talent that is, he was born with, but you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who worked harder at it, because what Jordan kept wanting to do was be the best version he could be. If Jordan simply said, "Oh, I'm better than everybody I know," then he probably wouldn't have been, the Michael Jordan we know. And so as leaders, it's like that. You don't look around your organization and say, well, I'm the best leader at this company or that company, and then relax. You keep saying, what could I be? At any rate, so leadership is a process. It's a process you want to develop in yourself. It's a process you want to develop in others. And really the point of this video is to help you with that, developing yourself as a leader. So the second thing is, leadership is a process of influence. At the end of the day, if you're not influencing people around you, you're not leading. I've heard Rick Warren tell the story about a guy who would tell people he's leading a parade until he looked behind him and found that nobody was following him. And so the way Warren says it is, that guy wasn't leading a parade, he was taking a walk. And that is the ultimate test of leadership. If nothing's getting influenced, well, I don't care what your title is, you're not a leader. And also for those of you who aren't in leadership positions, every now and then I'll encounter an engineer who will, complain, no one will listen to me, that's why they need to make me a leader, a manager, so people will listen to me. And the bad news there is, if they won't listen to you before you have a title, they won't listen to you after you have a title. You'll just be kind of a bigger joke. At any rate, so leadership isn't about a position. Leadership is about a process that you develop that skill and learn to influence others. Okay, so that part's helpful. But the part I really want to get to on this COVID-19 thing is the other part. So, what is leadership involved? When we talk about developing your leadership skills and exercising your leadership skills, what are the things you're doing? And the first one is relationship. And, Brian Herndon did on his dissertation. I love the way he opened it. His opening sentence is, leadership is about relationship. And that's absolutely true. And first and foremost, leadership is about relating to other people. I mean, that's the nature, that's the method through which we influence. And, as engineering managers, right, we forget that. We forget that the minute you become a manager, you are in the people business. And, I remember telling a high school counselor I want to be an engineer so I don't have to work with people. And, much to my surprise, I learned not only do I have to work with people, I have to work with the worst kind of people, engineers who don't want to work with people, like, basically, oh no, I have to work with people like me. At any rate, I'm happy to report I have long since got over that, and I think working with people is my favorite part about leading and being a, engineering executive. But at any rate, we're about relationships, and so if your leadership style is all consumed with, defining our next product and where, what's our product roadmap and what's our staffing situation going to be, is, well, that's important, and certainly product roadmap and all that encompasses a huge part of vision. But the key thing is it starts with relationship, and we need to cultivate and maintain relationships, and that's a good lesson for this COVID-19. When I in the decade that I was responsible for all the medical device software at Tandem Diabetes Care, one of the things I'm proud about is I never went a week without having a personal conversation with every person in the department. And toward the end there, we had more than 50 people, and that got to be a little bit of a challenge. But I always made that a top priority, is, first and foremost, just have kind of those touch points with everybody. And what you do is you just simply find something you can talk about, So one of the employees was interested in birds, and I'd ask, her, well, have you seen any interesting birds? And, I figured out a lot of the guys are interested in football, so I'd ask them about their team and just always find things to talk about and just use those conversations as a way to genuinely express interest and letting them know that I think about them and that they're in that circle of friend. At any rate, so the question then is, to what extent are you doing that? You're going to have to go out of your way. Maybe when we're all in the office together, it's easy to see somebody in the lunchroom or whatnot. But I would encourage you to be really thinking about, how do you really touch people in your department? And remember, it's not just your direct reports, especially if you're a senior manager. People look to the management and at a couple levels. One is, it's important to get the sense that they're leading and they're in charge. The other sense is it's just highly motivating, especially for young engineers. If you're a VP or something, or director, senior director, whatnot, and you talk to an engineer who's 21 years old or 22 years old, you stop, have a 2-minute conversation with them. I guarantee that they will call their mom that night and say, I talked to, and fill in your name. And it's easy for us to forget how important, when we're executives, that especially for the young engineers, to just have a relationship. The second thing is communication. The primary way we influence is through communication. I mean, you can have all the great plans, all the great product, vision, all these things. But if you don't communicate it to your people, if the people don't understand what you're thinking, it is all for nothing. And so, for an engineer, you really need to work on your communication, and that can be verbal, that can be, written, whatever. My opinion is probably one of the best things to do is make short little videos and just say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. One thing our VP does at Tandem that I think is just A plus is once a month he has a meeting where he simply gets everybody together and has a big, every project gets to display some of their, what they're working on, and we get to see our coworkers. And especially during this COVID thing, that's real important, is to maintain that sense of connectivity. But if you're a senior executive leading engineers, you got to be working at those relationships, and you got to be working at communicating. And by the way, I know from time to time I really rip on the situational leadership theory, and there's a lot of things not to like about it. I mean, that theory was developed in 1969. There's virtually no research behind it, at least no peer-reviewed, journal research. And one of the things I really dislike about that theory is, as you progress through these stages, the thing it prescribes is, as a person gets proficient and knows what they're doing, is the leader can have less relationship with that employee, and that's just horrible. You always want to have more relationship and more communication, because those continue to be the basis of your leadership. And as you get someone who's more skilled and more standalone, that's those are your best employees, and those are the ones you want to communicate with. Those are the ones you want to have the most relationship with. So as a leader, you grow ever closer to your people. You don't suddenly decide to distance them just because they're good at their job and don't need your input. I mean, that's just horrid, and that is absolutely old school leadership. And well, what's wrong with old school leadership? Well, other than absolutely every bit of research since about 2000 has shown that these new leadership paradigms that are relationship focused result in more productive users, higher job satisfaction among the employees, better employee retention. I mean, there is no measurable thing in organizations that isn't better with relationship-oriented leadership. Okay, and the final thing is vision. Now, most engineering managers I know are pretty good about vision. If nothing else, they're using Scrum and a product backlog to communicate where to go, and that's good. And if you talk to somebody who maybe isn't using Scrum, there are other ways to communicate backlogs, but I've not seen anything personally that works as well. By the way, I almost never talk about management. I usually just talk about leadership. But the one thing I do say about management is, boy, if you're not using Scrum, you are really missing out. But at any rate, we can be pretty good about communicating, where we want to go and what the product needs to be. But, vision is about really painting the picture of the future. And what that involves also is things like, what's our vision for the team, for the relationships. I mean, when the few of us that were the original employees at Tandem Diabetes Care, 14 years ago, we were having almost daily conversations, and it would kind of go like this, let's make Tandem a place we'd like to work at, because we'd all come from or several of the original guys came from this small little engineering services company in Irvine that was just toxic beyond belief. I mean, it was just, I could do several videos. Oh, maybe I will. Anyway, it was just this crazy toxic place, and everything from people wouldn't make eye contact if you said hello walking down the hall, to at meetings they would always leave an empty chair. It was a requirement to have an empty chair at every meeting, because the company was named after a character in a popular book series that the owner liked, and the owner insisted we leave an open chair for the ghost of this guy, and just insanity. And at any rate, we kept saying, what do we want Tandem to be? And we'd talk about integrity. We talked about, we always look in the mirror every morning, and we want to be able to look in the mirror and not go, oh gosh, I can't believe I did that. So we talked about integrity. We talked about maintaining friendships. We talked about people loving working there and staying there a decade. And here we are 14 years later, and our turnover in the R&D department is almost zero. And but see, my point is, that's vision. That's what it's like to cast a vision of the future. To talk about, okay, when COVID is over, what we want to do is, maybe our desks will be reconfigured, or maybe we'll have this for the building, or even, what's the plan? Well, hey, starting in June, we'll start re-entering, or anyway, cast a future in every way you can think about of what the future will look like, whether it's product related, or whether it's sort of COVID related or whatever. And for those of you who have never really thought about the important role of relationships, I would encourage you to cast a vision about, our friendships and about the family and things like that. Any rate, so those are a few thoughts on leading during COVID. I hope that's helpful. Hey, if you'd like to see other videos on leadership, I've got a whole bunch at tomulrichconsulting.com. If you're on YouTube, you can search on Dr. Tom Ulrich. And at any rate, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.